Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the spinal tracts. Think of them as the incredible information superhighways of your nervous system.
So here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to tackle this in 3 parts. First up, we'll explore the ascending pathways, which are responsible for carrying all that sensory information up to the brain. Then we'll flip it and look at the descending pathways that send motor commands down from the brain. And finally, we'll connect it all to the real world by looking at some key clinical syndromes that happen when these tracts get damaged.
All right, let's jump right in. We're starting with the ascending tracts. These are the pathways that carry sensory information from all over your body, making that critical journey up to the brain. This table gives us a fantastic bird's eye view of the 3 major ascending sensory pathways. So if you look at the dorsal column, you see it's all about fine touch, proprioception, which is your sense of body position and vibration. Next, we have the spinal thalamic tract. This one handles pain, temperature, and also what's called non-discriminative touch. And finally, there are the spinocerebellar tracts, which are in charge of subconscious posture and coordination. Now we're going to break each of these down in detail.
Let's start with the dorsal column pathway. This is our route for fine touch, proprioception, and vibration. As you can see, it's a 3-neuron pathway. The first order neuron enters the spinal cord and travels up on the same side, we call that ipsilaterally, all the way to the medulla. There, it synapses with the second order neuron. And this is a key moment. This neuron immediately decussates, which is just a fancy word for crossing over to the opposite side of the brainstem. From there, it continues its journey up to the thalamus. And finally, the third order neuron takes over, projecting from the thalamus to its final stop, the somatosensory cortex in the brain's parietal lobe.
Okay, now let's trace the spinothalamic tract. This is the main pathway for pain and temperature, and you need to notice a really crucial difference from the dorsal column. The first-order neuron enters the spinal cord and synapses almost right away in the dorsal horn. The second-order neuron then decussates, or crosses over, right there in the spinal cord, before it even starts its journey up on the opposite side to the thalamus. This tract is thought to be the primary route for sharp pain. The last step, though, is exactly the same as before. The third-order neuron projects from the thalamus right up to the somatosensory cortex.
Now, the spinocerebellar tracts, they're a different beast altogether. Their destination isn't the cortex, it's the cerebellum, the brain's coordination center. Their whole job is to handle subconscious posture and coordinate our movements, and they do this using data streaming in from muscle stretch and tension receptors. And because this role is a bit more direct, they only have 2 neurons in their chain, not 3 like the others we've seen. This slide does a great job comparing the 2 main spinocerebellar tracts. Let's start on the right, with the dorsal tract. It travels up ipsilaterally, meaning it stays on the same side. It originates from a specific group of cells called Clark's column and enters the cerebellum through the inferior cerebellar peduncle. That's just a big bundle of nerve fibers connecting the cerebellum to the brainstem. Now contrast that with the ventral tract on the left. Its fibers actually decussate, ascend contralaterally on the opposite side, and enter through the superior cerebellar peduncle. And what's really interesting is that some of these ventral fibers then decussate a second time once they're inside the cerebellum.
So, just for the sake of being complete, we have to mention the spino-reticulothalamic system. While we said the spinothalamic tract handles sharp pain, this parallel system is believed to be the specific pathway that carries the signals for that more diffuse, dull, aching kind of pain.
All right, time to move on to our second section, the descending motor pathways. Now we're looking at how the brain's commands travel down the spinal cord to control all the muscles in the body.
Now, what's really cool about this diagram is that you can visually trace the entire main motor pathway, the corticospinal tract. You can actually follow the line from where it starts up in the motor cortex, watch it travel down through the midbrain, the pons, and the medulla, and see its journey all the way down into the spinal cord.
So that diagram gave us the big picture. This table breaks down all the key details. First, its function. This tract is all about controlling voluntary, discrete, and skilled movements. Its origin is the primary motor cortex, specifically from these huge neurons called Bett cells. As for the pathway, the axons descend and form those structures in the medulla called the medullary pyramids. And it's in the lower part of the medulla where the vast majority of these fibers decussate, or cross over to the other side. The way these fibers terminate is also incredibly specific and really tells a story about our motor demands. Look at this number, 55%. That represents the huge proportion of cortical spinal fibers that stop at the cervical levels of the spinal cord. And why is that? Well, it's because of the immense amount of fine motor control we need for our arms, and especially our hands.
And just to complete the picture, 20% of the fibers terminate in the thoracic region, and the last 25% make it down to the lumbosacral region to control our leg.
Okay, next up is the rubrospinal tract. Looking at the diagram here, you can see it originates in a spot called the red nucleus, which is in the midbrain. From there, the axons cross over almost immediately in what's called the ventral tegmental decussation, before they continue their descent.
This table gives us the full story on the rubrospinal tract. Its main job, its function, is to control the tone of the flexor muscles in our limbs. As we just saw, its origin is the red nucleus in the midbrain. The pathway involves those fibers crossing right away and then descending near the lateral corticospinal tract. And this is crucial. The red nucleus itself receives inputs from both the motor cortex and the cerebellum, which makes it a really important relay station in the motor system. The tectospinal tract begins its journey in a different part of the midbrain, the superior colliculus. Now, this area is a major hub for processing visual information, which gives us a massive clue about this tract's role in our reflex movements.
And sure enough, the details here confirm it. The tract's function is to mediate reflex movements of the head and neck in response to something you see. The pathway crosses over in the dorsal tegmental decussation and then terminates mainly in the cervical segments of the spinal cord, exactly where it needs to be to control those neck muscles.
Next, we have the vestibulospinal tracts, which are absolutely essential for balance. As you can see in the table, there are actually two of them. The lateral tract descends ipsilaterally, on the same side, and it excites extensor muscles, which is what helps us maintain our posture and stand up straight against gravity. The medial tract is part of a larger fiber bundle called the medial longitudinal fasciculus, and its main job is to coordinate head and eye movements so our vision stays stable when we move. Both of these tracts get their start in the vestibular nuclei, which process all that balance information coming from our inner ear.
And finally, we have the reticulospinal tracts, and these have an incredibly broad range of influence. The medial, or pontine tract, starts in the pons and descends ipsilaterally. The lateral, or medullary tract, starts in the medulla and descends bilaterally, meaning to both sides. Together, these tracts influence just about everything: voluntary movement, reflexes, muscle tone, and even automatic functions like our circulation and breathing.
Okay, so we've laid all this complex anatomical groundwork. Now it's time to connect it to medicine and explore the clinical syndromes that happen when these specific information highways get blocked. This table gives us a great clinical overview, directly linking the tracts we've just discussed to their associated conditions. For example, damage to the dorsal column can be seen in tabes dorsalis, a B12 deficiency, and multiple sclerosis. Damage to the spinothalamic tract is the hallmark of syringomelia. The spinocerebellar tract is affected in a condition called Friedreich's ataxia. And finally, the corticospinal tract is implicated in things like hereditary spastic paraparesis.
Let's take a closer look at syringomyelia. In this condition, a fluid-filled cavity called the syrinx forms right in the center of the spinal cord. And because of its very specific location, it damages the spinothalamic tract fibers at the exact point where they are crossing over, leading to a very characteristic pattern of sensory loss. Patients lose pain and temperature sensation, often in their arms and shoulders, while their sense of touch and proprioception remains intact.
Another perfect clinical example is subacute combined degeneration. As the slide says, this is a condition that results from a vitamin B12 deficiency, and it specifically targets and damages the dorsal columns. Now, if you remember the function of that pathway, the symptoms make perfect sense. The damage leads to patients losing their sense of fine touch, proprioception, and vibration.
And so we end with this thought. All of this incredibly detailed anatomy isn't just for academics. By understanding these precise ascending and descending pathways, our neurologists can essentially work backwards. They can take a patient's specific symptoms, what they can and can't feel, what they can and can't move, and use that information, just like a map, to pinpoint exactly where on this complex information superhighway the damages occur.